Mic test. 1, 2. Standby crew. 3, 2, 1. Rolling for On Her Side.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, and welcome to On Her Side. I have today with me my guest Selamanya Rajput. Selamanya, jazakallah for joining the program. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Jazakallah for having me on this show.
So Selamanya, today we're talking about marriage. We're talking about love, romance, the concept that we see in mainstream media so very often, so common nowadays, of this fairy tale romance and this happily ever after ending, and just a picture of perfect bliss, eternal happiness that can be found once you've found Mr. Right or Mrs. Right, that your life is now perfect. And this is something that we see so often. We also then see this play out in the minds of youth, who are just about to maybe embark on this journey of finding a good match for themselves or a good partner.
I like how you mentioned fairy tale because that is what it is, right? When we're talking about those kind of stories or the mainstream media is there for entertainment, right? So that's the first thing that came to my mind when you mentioned fairy tales, is that it is very far away from reality, right? Media or entertainment or, movies of fairy tales, they are meant for entertainment for a short period of time. When we refer to them or we get entertained by them, that's what they're there for. That's the purpose of them. It is to, for those who are watching them, it is to sort of distance or disassociate them from what actually is happening in their life, to provide them a couple of hours of relaxed entertainment, right? So I think we need to realize or understand that that is not necessarily what's happening in real life or reality.
Yeah, but I think it takes a certain level of conscious awareness about that, right? Because if you think about it, from the time that we're very young, we're exposed to these stories, these fairy tale narratives, and this is common across all cultures in the world, right? So this is all languages, all cultures, all countries. They have their own version of these perfect romance stories, these fairy tales that end in happily ever after. And we're exposed to it, from the very time of childhood all the way up to present time, right? So sometimes it's very hard to believe that there is something else that's out there that's a reality, and this is not the reality, right? And I think the other thing too is that whenever you see these movies or you hear these stories or you read these books, genuinely it makes you happy to see other people find their perfect match and they're happy now too, right? And who doesn't want to be happy? So you feel like, oh, this is a story that I want to live. I want this to be a part of my life as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. But what we often forget, or maybe the youth or, anybody who's too much engrossed into these fairy tales, what we fail to understand sometimes is that those stories that we see, they focus on the journey before finding the partner, right? There may be challenges, and obviously there's a climax to a story, and then you solve the problem, and then all those movies seem to end where they find...
And they lived happily ever after.
And they lived
so it's
happily
like, now
after,
what?
right? But then we need to realize that life for a couple begins at that point.
After that,
right? That story of finding each other, although it may be challenging, it's not it. Right? Yeah. It's not where it ends.
And I think that it's also important, though, to look at that story, to kind of unpack that story. So in my mind, the way that I've always seen it is that the heroine of the story or the movie or of the book is, constantly searching for this perfect man, right? So this perfect Mr. Right that she's searching for, and she's making all these mistakes, and she's looking in all the wrong places and finding all the wrong people, and she's miserable. And then she's comparing herself to her friends who have either moved on or they have also families and things like that. And then she's also anxious that way. And then she does manage to find that person, and now happily ever after, as you said, the story ends there. Right. But if you just maybe stop at one point, so first of all, her job is just to find this person. That's like her major objective, her goal in life is to find Mr. Right, and she will do whatever it takes to find that person. And so I think that's also very disturbing, because we know that, Islam empowers both men and women to not just wait. We take proactive measures to go and search for that potential proper match alongside our families, and we have like a to-do list, and if we follow that, we have some good strategies in place, and so we don't waste our time just here and there and looking everywhere to find that person.
Right. And it's funny you mentioned the fact that in those movies, for example, the movie itself is just focusing on that aspect of a person's life, which is one small portion, right? At that time, yes, it can be the big project that you need to undertake, but at the same time, we need to understand that we as a person need to grow. There are other things in life that we need to work hard for, right? Making ourselves a better person, increasing our morals,
spirituality,
right?
connecting with
There are so many
faith,
things that we should be focusing on, right?
Yeah.
But that media or that piece of entertainment will only show that one aspect.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, the entire movie will revolve around a miserable life until that is fulfilled.
Yes, exactly.
Right? Or waiting, right?
Exactly.
Oftentimes there's like that princess waiting for her Prince Charming.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think the other thing too is that because the movie does end at having found that perfect match, the youth and everyone else who's an audience to that story is very misprepared for what realistically the future now will be, right? And we all know that it's not always candlelight dinners and roses and things like that. There's grocery shopping and there's bills to pay, and there's just hard work around the house and at work, and you're doing so many things. It's not perfect all the time. And I think because the viewers or the youth who are wanting to project this lifestyle or this story on themselves are so misprepared, or they have unrealistic expectations, it leads to more misery than there would have been if you were more practical, right?
Right. They're not prepared.
They're not prepared.
Because we're showing that the focus should be finding a person.
Exactly.
And then nothing else.
And that's about it.
That's it.
So that's the main thing. And the other thing too is that I find what happens is, because you have been shown this picture of bliss and eternal happiness and perfection, what people want to do then is they want to continue that phase after they get married, right? And because life is not like that, and sometimes you're so obsessed with promoting this image of perfection onto others. In this day and age, we have social media, and with the advent of social media, you have a global audience whom you can also showcase your lifestyle, and who's also, on the flip side of it, is able to judge you and critique you within like a millisecond, right? So for people who really believe in this perfection, happily ever after, now that I've found this person, my life is perfect and happy, they constantly strive to achieve that. And to be very honest, that costs money, right? Like, I mean, if you're bringing home roses like every day, that costs money. And then if you try to downgrade and bring them like from Costco or something, that still costs money. Right. And it takes effort, and you're not ready for that every day. You can't eat out every day. You can't have these vacations and this type of lifestyle all the time. So that puts pressure on you economically. And then we know, love goes out the window when there's no money in your pockets, right?
Yeah, and I agree. And it's not just the candlelight dinner or the roses, right? Like, we have to understand that after you found that person and you're now living a life together, every day is a challenge. There are ups and downs. We need to support each other in many, many ways, not just financially, right? There's so much to life, right? There will be, it's a whole journey, right? It's 40, 50
and it's
or
two
so
different
years.
people.
It's two different people.
Who don't know each other sometimes. Yeah. And now they're coming and they're living together day and night.
Right? So not just understanding each other as a person, but compromising, understanding to live with each other's habits that you don't necessarily know of beforehand, and then together trying to overcome all the things that happen in life, right? Their children, family, work. There's so much to life, right? It's not just the two of them together living in a house, right? There's so much. And to be able to kind of together make that journey happen successfully, happily, on both sides, it requires a lot of effort. It's an investment on all levels.
Yeah, it's hard work.
It's hard work.
It's hard work.
It's very hard work.
It's absolutely true. And you know, I know of this girl, when we talk about being misprepared for the future and being unrealistic in your expectations, I know this girl who got married, and you know, the day after the wedding, she woke up in the morning and she had this expectation that breakfast would be taken care of and it would be served, and it was fine, it's all good. Second day, third day, fourth day, still everyone's really happy, breakfast is being served now. And then when things settled down, and it was like a week later or however many weeks later, it was now real life, right? So you wake up in the morning, you've got to like make stuff for yourself. And it just so was, it was so obvious that she honestly did not have any concept of how you prepare a breakfast, because for her whole life, basically like from university onwards, she was just used to going out and grabbing a Starbucks or a Timmy's on the way to school, to work, whatever. And she had never ever prepared breakfast for herself, forget herself, but not even for, you know, anyone else. And I guess it was just really, so things like that, like those are very small things that you've never paid attention to because of your lifestyle, or because you never thought of it. You never thought that this would be a thing, you know, that I would have to do this.
Right. And that's one example, right? A breakfast example. I can relate my own.
And they never show you that in the media, right? Like they'll never show you that in a movie or anything like that.
Right. Those movies are focused on how you're supposed to look perfect, and then your partner is the Prince Charming, and that's about it.
That's about it.
That's about it. But like I can relate personally for me. So I was a little bit more prepared for breakfast, but for many other things, they just hit me when they happen. Yeah. Right. And it's small things, but they add up. And if you can't keep up, you know, that's when things start to shuffle. It's like for me, I have a huge family, and then my husband also has a huge family. Right. So just interacting with all these people was new to me. Right. And it required a lot of effort. Right. It's not just you and your partner, and that's it, right? There's so many other people. There's neighbors. You're making a home, right? You're making a partnership. And in order to make that partnership work on every level, you need to be able to invest that energy on every level and be prepared for it before you embark on that journey, right? Spiritually, morally, on every single level. Yeah. That requires a lot of work, and it's something that's continuous, right? Every day brings a new challenge. Yeah. Right? And we don't expect those things, but
and then, and going back to just what you just said earlier, you said, you know, the main criteria for this match in these movies or in these stories we hear is beauty. It's outward beauty that's just skin deep. It's how you look, and you know. So unfortunately, then these stories define very difficult standards of beauty that we must all subscribe to. Right? Men and women. I'm not saying it's just for women. It's also for men. I'm sure there's a lot of pressure. But for girls, it's detrimental, you know, to their mental well-being. From a young age, the expectation is that I absolutely need to do whatever I can to become beautiful. Because if I become beautiful, that's how I'm going to find Mr. Right. That's how I'm going to get his attention. And probably the same way for men as well. And that's a horrible way to live.
It is. And it's not just the fact that that's putting a lot of pressure on your physical being, but it also pushes you away from all the other things that you need to work on, right? If you're focused on how you look physically, then what energy are you going to spend on becoming a better person morally? Yeah. Right? You're not focused on those things, and those are the things that will make...
And even social skills and communication skills and interpersonal skills and all of that.
Exactly. All of those things require your energy, your mental presence.
But you're just busy, with the latest, you know, makeup and how I can lose weight and how I can just look beautiful.
And all those things are temporary, right? There's only a certain age, which according to this mainstream media, there's a very short span in a person's life where what they're portraying, right? That perfect, beautiful person, male or female, right? They never show an older couple, right? Yeah. They only show that one, that age period where you're supposed to find a partner, right? Yeah. But they don't show anything beyond that.
And so it makes people miserable and anxiety-ridden when they've passed perhaps that time, and now they're so anxious because they feel like they're no longer, you know, meeting that criteria for eligibility or something like that. And the other thing, too, is that it's not the viewer directly who is maybe absorbing these messages from the media. It's society as a whole that buys into it and then puts pressure on each other to fulfill these expectations, these social expectations of perfection and beauty. And the other thing too I wanted to mention is that the concept of love that is presented oftentimes to us is this neurochemical connection that you will feel with another human being when you see them, love at first sight, you can call it. And it's this overwhelmingly emotional, your heart's racing and that type of hyped up moment that will be called love. And that's your connection. And actually, that's how you know that you found that right person. So what people do is they wait for that to happen because they think it's going to happen. That's how it happens. That's how I know that this person is the person for me. But that's not the way it is, right?
It's not. And it takes time to understand and appreciate another person's positive traits. Right? Or
and
personality.
Their beauty
and
from
their
within.
beauty from
Yeah.
within.
Yeah.
It's not a thing that happens in 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Over time, you learn to
Yes.
appreciate all those
Yes.
positive values that person
Yes.
has.
Yes.
Or to display your own positive
Yeah.
values, right? For the other person. And when you mentioned the neurochemical factor, that changes over time,
Yes.
like you mentioned,
Yes.
right? So it's not something that will be lasting forever.
Yes. So even if you did find that neurochemical
Right.
connect that one moment,
Right.
25 years later, are you still going to
It
feel
will
the
not.
same way? Because everybody knows your brain changes over time, your neurochemistry changes over time.
It does. And if we come back to the point of happily ever after, that connection or the physical connection is not going to give you that happily ever after because it will change.
It's not going to last.
It's not going to last. What will last is, respect, mutual love, understanding,
the qualities and the
compromising.
virtues that you bring
Exactly.
to the table.
And that reminds me, there was this article that I was reading not too long ago. It was published in The Atlantic. It's a newspaper. And it was specifically on this topic. I believe the title was something like How to Achieve the Happily Ever After. And what that article said was that aside from everything else, if you put everything else aside, just making sure that you have a bit of happiness will require two things: kindness and patience, right? So it had nothing to do with physical appearance, the instant connection or the love at first sight. It was really just gentleness, kindness over time, and patience, right? What does that teach us? Patience, right? It takes time. You need to appreciate each other's values. You need to understand that you support each other over challenges over time, and that's how you make a relationship last.
And it's more so that you fall in love with the qualities that your partner brings and their sense of compromise and sacrifice perhaps and those types of virtues that they bring. And you fall in love with that and that automatically helps you connect, right? That's how it is.
And the key word there, compromise and sacrifice, right? And that's from both ends, right? Not just one of the two parties. It is equally important that both parties do that. That was just reminding me of a personal experience that I had, and that's like an every weekend thing for me and my partner, for my spouse. Every weekend we try to see where we can go out as a family, and it's always a challenge because I enjoy different things and he enjoys different things. So every weekend one of us has to compromise, and it's a 50-50 partnership, right? One weekend I decide where we get to go, and then the other weekend would be him. So, all this to say that it's not something that just comes to you. You need to put that effort, and so does your partner.
Just going back to that, you're waiting for that instant connect to happen. I remember I met this lady once who had asked me to, pray because they were looking for a match for her son. And she said, we've been looking for so many years and we haven't found the right family, the right match, etc. So please pray. And I said, well, like what's the problem or what happens? And she says, well, every time, I show a picture of a girl or someone to my son, he instantly says that I'm not feeling it. I'm just not feeling it.
From a picture?
From a picture. He's not feeling anything. So he's going to wait now until he feels something by looking at a picture, which is never going to happen. And so now you're just wasting time. You're letting potentially good matches go by. And that's not just one person. This is many, many people, women included, who are passing by on potentially really healthy matches because they're waiting superficially for this instant connect, which they're not feeling, and we don't know when they're going to feel.
And that, unfortunately, might be a direct consequence of the mainstream media, right? That's how they portray it in the movie, right? A movie is an hour and a half, 2 hours maybe, right? And in that 2 hours, somebody sees another person, and it's like, stars and all those sparks happening. Yeah.
The other thing, too, is that in these stories and movies and books that we read and hear, the relationship that appears, once you found your perfect match, once you found Mr. Right, the relationship is, of course, very exciting, right? So you have this lifestyle of excitement. You're going places, you're eating out, you're just doing all the things that just make you so happy, and your life is perfect. So what people tend to do then is they watch that, and then they look around, especially the youth who are now embarking on this journey to find their perfect match. They look around their homes and in their own circles and compare those relationships that they see on TV to relationships around them. Maybe their parents' relationship, grandparents' relationships, in their marriages, older cousins, siblings, etc. And because in a lot of cultures, marriage and love, everything like that, it's not expressed in the same way. There might be a little bit of a dryness, to the relationship that you visually observe in your circle. And when youth compare that to the exciting things that they see and hear, even on social media, they tend to think perhaps to themselves that this is not what my marriage is going to be. My marriage is going to be very exciting, and I'm going to make sure that it is, and it's not going to be dry like this. But they don't know that doesn't actually exist. That wasn't real. You can't just always be going out on vacations and having fun together and eating out and enjoying yourself. There's highs and lows, as you said. There's always ups and downs. There's good and bad. And even people who think that they know that they are very well aware of that's how life is, I don't think are prepared, like we said, for when it actually happens, right?
Yeah, I think mainstream media, and especially because of social media, it has become so natural to us now to look at those pieces, to look at all that media that has been imparted on us. We forget that that's fictional, right? That is, there is very little truth to those things, right? Those are obviously, even through social media, existing couples who do post, happy moments, we fail to realize that those happy moments may be 1% of their lives, right?
Yeah.
People lead very
But everybody projects
lives.
it in a way as if they're having the best time of their lives. And then you look at it and you start to feel bad, and you're like, I'm not. And you compare, and that's how the anxiety, that's a whole other conversation about the downside of oversharing through social media, right?
Right. And just, and it impacts everybody mentally, right? Psychologically, if you are going to now base your own standards or try to compare yourself to what you see or what you hear, then you're always going to have a sense of failure. Because there's no way you can keep up with that. Reality is very different from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also I think about it, is happiness your end game? Like, is happiness is what you're trying to achieve in your life, in your married life? I think we would lean more towards achieving contentment of your soul. But when you talk about it that way, it just sounds as if you're settling. I'm content. I may not be happy, but I'm content. So it sounds like you're a step below happiness, right? And I think also the other thing is that, like you also mentioned, it takes a lot of hard work and effort, right? So I would say that we would maybe subscribe more to a concept of a soulmate in progress. You don't just instantly found that perfectly ready soulmate whom you've now clicked with, and so now you found each other, and so now it's done, it's good. I think this person evolves with you, and like you said, you learn to cover each other's gaps and deficiencies, and then you work through with sacrifice and patience and compromise, and that's how you create your own happily ever after.
Yeah, I like that word you used, the soulmate in progress, and that just made me realize or remember that we also are growing, right? It's not just the other person, right? We have to put the same standard on ourselves as well, right? When we find somebody where, yes, we're going with them, but we are also growing, right? Let's not forget that. It's both ways,
Yeah.
right? And then obviously at age 20, 25, 30, whenever you're finding a partner for you, that's one age, but then all the bigger milestones in life happen after
Afterwards,
that,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So together in progress,
Yeah.
you are helping each other,
Yeah.
covering your faults, shortcomings, but also, highlighting each other's
Yeah. And
right,
growing
positive,
together.
growing
Yeah.
together, and making sure that you step each milestone
Yeah.
together.
So I guess we can both agree that there is no fairy tale conclusion to real life. But if we choose to put in the effort and the time and really invest in our relationships, we can build our own happily ever after. Jazakallah, Salmana, that was wonderful. Jazakallah for coming onto the program.
Jazakallah for having me. I enjoyed myself.
Jazakallah. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Cut. That's a wrap for On Her Side.